Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. I just realized I left my quote-unquote Father's Day shirt on here. So
I was gonna call that out if you didn't.
DW's dad. So Molly got me this, I guess, dog dad shirt. So here we are. We're on live TV with this dog dad shirt. Don't know what. I guess if you're new to the show, that's your introduction.
There we go. It's adorable. There's like a little caricature of DW on the shirt, on the breast pocket. Very true to life.
This was an Etsy product.
It was,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it in the show notes, but you can look it up, I guess.
At any rate, what's new and exciting?
Well, training is going well. I've just switched from my gravel phase of the year, and now we're going into more of getting ready for mountain bike nationals, whilst also building my run mileage to prepare for Leadville, your race, where I will pace approximately 40 miles. So I do need to be conditioned to run 40 miles. So it's coming back. We did 20K on the weekend and watched the gravel. We always call it the Gravel World Championships of the World, but there was a gravel fondo qualifier to let people go to the World Championships of Gravel, as I understand it. So that was a local race here, which was sort of neat. And a few clients went in and did it. So we went and watched the start, and then we continued on your key run, which was 20 miles. And how are you feeling in your preparations for Leadville?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's one of those things where I keep not really feeling overly confident, and then I start thinking about it, and I'm like, I ran 20 miles on Saturday, came home, and was a completely normal human the rest of the day.
That's right. You're moving quite well.
So and then 14 miles yesterday with a little bit of speed in there. So feeling generally good. Plans are starting to come together. It's always a bit of any race like this, anyone who's done Leadville, run or bike, or any of these kind of bigger races that require crew and pacers and stuff, it's definitely way more complicated than,
just running.
Running.
Yep.
So I feel like the running I've got under control. It's everything else that's definitely still a lot of little question marks. The big stuff's there. It's really just kind of getting it all put together.
And probably good reminders, as I'm thinking through, when a lot of us are busy and you do your own races and you have your own life, but it is a reminder to try and help out people when they're doing, they need crew or someone to feed them or whatever. Right?
Watch their small dog.
Feeding. Yeah, sure. We have a dog care. We have the people who are going to feed, and then there's pacers on top of that. So just trying to remember, these are things that you could do as well, within your, to try and pay it forward if maybe someday you're going to go for a big run race or a fastest known time or 24-hour solo race, 8-hour solo race, or just again feeding in a cross-country race or something like that. Holding bikes in cyclocross races. All of these events require some inputs, but certainly the ultra stuff is a day of your life potentially you're volunteering.
And definitely the overnight portion, or the fact that it's going to be very, very
you're
late,
not sleeping.
is tricky. Yep. I have to say, I was talking to my dad the other day, and I told him my sister's going to come out to Colorado, which is very exciting. She and her friend are going to come out and watch DW while I race. That's sort of their main job. And my dad was like, "Are you sure that's going to be enough people watching him?" And I think he was sort of serious.
Okay. He's a bit of a loose cannon.
DW, not my dad. My dad is not a loose cannon. No. My dad is the most relaxed human on the planet.
Well, he was probably making fun of you, and again, we did bring up this T-shirt that I'm wearing to start off here, so you can see where the problem lies. But
hey.
So we have a topic today. Before too long, we'd like to get this topic in before folks leave. We're talking about the auto pause and pausing your workout during your workout, and sort of when that might make sense, and reasons not to do it as athletes especially. So that's sort of the question. We have put this on social media, and we got some feedback. We got a poll as well that went out. Do you auto pause or not, or what is it?
I was going to say, so if you aren't aware, auto pause is when, I think most devices have it. Garmin is probably the most well-known for having it. You can set your Garmin to auto pause, so if you're stopped and you can set the duration of time you stop. Some people have it set where it's like, if you're stopped for 5 seconds, it auto pauses. Oh. Some of them you can set it where if you're stopped for 30 or 60 seconds or whatever, then it auto pauses.
That would be a different setting for sure. And it can be speed. I've seen also sometimes with power, you almost pause when you're not producing any power. which sort of hints at the issue there as well. But do you think that as far as what autopause is, that's, you know, it's a function that stops the workout timer?
I think so, yeah. And I mean, I think the autopause discussion that we're going to have also relates to people who pause manually whenever they stop. Like, I know plenty of people who at stoplights will, whether it's running or biking, you know, tap their watch or tap their computer to pause it and then turn it back on when they start going.
So we might actually call this episode, you know, should you pause your workout when you stop? We also have a post that went up sort of detailing this, which we'll link to, obviously, about the autopause function.
Yeah. So when we put this out, we were not really thinking it was going to get a huge response, but I have to say, like, this is akin to when I wrote that article about how women stopped to pee in the Peloton at the Tour de France, where maybe it didn't blow up to quite that level, where the people who were doing the commentary for the Tour de France were talking about that article, which is still the funniest thing to me.
Big topics.
Great topics. But it did get a ton of engagement from our viewers, listeners, readers, and I'd say it was pretty mixed. A lot of really funny responses, for sure.
Right. No, we had some like marital ones where one spouse was on one side of the autopause debate.
Yeah, so I mean, we got like, this is an interesting debate I have with my partner who has it turned on and has it turned off and I leave mine on. For the road, I don't have issues, but the mountain bike, it's definitely a problem. Dude, that will take me down from 22 kilometers an hour to 21, basically dropping their speed by a kilometer an hour.
A separate topic, yeah.
If I use autopause, I would always be late for dinner is actually probably my favorite one because that really gets to the heart of the issue.
You only have so much time, right? Yeah.
And it also gets to what counts as training, I guess. Like what counts as the time on the bike when you're out on, you know, a 3-hour endurance ride.
Right, and that's in our post. I didn't quite highlight. I was reflecting on that today. I want to remove where I put this, but that idea that like chamois time is training time. I don't know if the listener has heard that. We say it, you know, with some frequency. This idea, and often people say it in that like they're sitting at the cafe in their chamois.
Side note: don't do that.
Which Molly doesn't like. But the idea to me is that, you know, I leave the house and usually, you know, I need to be back for work or we're going for, you know, do something. And so like there's only so much time to complete the workout. So when I leave, there's usually like exactly 90 minutes to do the 90-minute workout. And so, yeah, I run into someone on the side of the, don't run into them. I meet, you know, someone stops me on the trail and says, hey, hello, you know, or, you know, someone needs help and I stop and help them, or there's a construction zone, you know, it's still 90 minutes. There's nothing I can do. So even if I auto pause, you know, I'm going to come back and it's going to be a short on the timer. But in my case, I do not auto pause because, again, chamois time is training time.
There we go.
And to me, should we get into this or do you have more of these?
I think that was pretty much like the bulk of the listener feedback. And then just a lot of like, yes, no, like definitely do that, definitely don't do that.
Was, I think, I don't remember the exact numbers. Say 60% were no, they don't auto pause, which is, you know, if it's not obvious, I think that's what we're suggesting to athletes who are training. We'll come, you know, look at the opposite there. When should you use it as well? I think it was about 20% said, about 20% said they do use it. And then there was WTF is, you know, what is auto pause? And that was another sort of 20%. So interesting because a lot of people, it doesn't even occur to that was an option.
Do you remember when you first get a computer, is that setting turned on or turned off?
I don't think so. What they do add is an auto lap that puts every 5K on the bike. I don't know what the run watches do, but every 5K it beeps and starts a new lap.
Yeah, my watch does that on the bike, which is very odd.
With young athletes, I usually have to be like, what's going on back there? And then, you know, we have to talk about how to remove it, right? Because we're maybe learning how to do intervals. So you're doing an 8-minute interval, but then it randomly every 5K, you know, makes a beep and then sets a new lap time, and then their lap time gets screwed up, so they're trying to do 8 minutes, but it just lapped at, you know, 2.5 minutes.
That is a very odd function to have turned on.
I think it just brings attention that that's something you could do. You know, runners, you know, it's more obvious. Like I have a run setting that is every, you know, 2K, but that does get annoying if you're doing intervals as a runner, right? Like it would really screw up your lap timer.
Does it actually like flip over back to 0 when you do that?
It starts a new lap. Yeah, you could still look at your elapsed time, your workout timer for the total time, but if you have an auto lap like that set up, it's a good question. There's probably another one where you could do an alert every 2K or
my watch just beeps or vibrates every mile.
But you don't think it starts a new lap time? Do you have lap time displayed?
No.
This is you're thinking though, aren't you?
No.
Okay, well that's an important separate topic, is this idea, but related topic, that you can use lap time. So a lot of these things are, I'd like to see that I'm holding 30 kilometers an hour. But if you're rolling out of the city, and again, there's no shade, I was saying to Molly, we are a little lucky. We live in a sort of mountain town right beside a big, rural roads, and, there's nice rail trails where you can run out our door and just start running, and nothing will stop you likely for as long as you go, right? Maybe the odd road crossing, you have to slow a little bit, but if you were, you could weave and like run, make a right-hand turn, you could probably do it. But this is true of most people, even in big cities, Toronto, New York, Chicago, like we coach people in a lot of the big cities, and they all seem to figure it out. And the idea is that in the warm-up, it's a little more intermittent. There's stop signs, and then they get to their little industrial loop or their park loop, or they get out of the city. And then they press lap and they start doing 2x20 minute intervals, or 5x5 or 3x3, or whatever it is. So they choose where they're doing it, and then they use the lap timer to segment the workout out, and that's when that it actually matters. And I think a lot of times that's what's missing, is people are trying to chase an average for an entire workout versus for a portion of the workout where we would warm up.
Sure. It seems interesting to me because, like, yes, we're privileged that we can mostly get out and not have to stop. But also, it sort of doesn't matter if that like, the auto pause function doesn't matter. Like, you are still stopping. It's not as though having the auto pause deletes the fact that you physically had to be stopped for 30 seconds.
Right.
And we were talking about this before we started recording. To me, the issue with the auto pause, and we've seen this before, is it takes a couple seconds to restart.
Right. Which is when you look it up, is a common complaint is, the autopause, I hate it. It takes 10 seconds and it's robbing me of the workout. And it's like, well, the answer is pretty clear. Just record the whole thing, because that acceleration is actually probably a pretty significant, you usually hit it a little bit to get up to speed, right? So there is like training stress that gets accumulated there. And on the other side of that, when you stop, most people, their heart rate is up. So there's actually, their body is still working when you stop moving. The heart is still beating, the lungs are still going. So you're actually missing the recovery portion, and then you're missing the acceleration portion, even if this was, an extended stop. So it is tricky. Yeah.
Well, and I think from a coaching standpoint, I guess, let's talk about this from the coaching standpoint. If you see a file from someone who auto pauses, what's sort of the problem there for you as the coach?
So, I mean, the reality is that most of these software, Strava, Training Peaks, which is the one we'll base around, they do record elapsed time. So you'll see gaps, but what, from a coaching perspective, is frustrating is you don't get to see the recovery heart rate when someone pauses. And again, you'll miss a little bit when so it'll not represent the total load, where again, the heart rate would be recorded, the power, which would be 0 for most of the time you're stopped, but except for as you're slowing, and then as you're accelerating, it's not recorded.
Sorry, what you're saying is you'll see the elapsed time. So say they were out for 2.5 hours, but the ride time was 2:10. So you'll see that it was 2:30
Strava
total.
does a great job of showing you that, I think, too.
But then you'll see that it was 20 minutes longer than the actual data that you have.
I think in Training Peaks, if I remember right, it puts it in like brackets, like how long they were out. So it'll be 8-hour ride. Often you'll see this, people are out all day, and it's like, well, that was a 3.5-hour ride that took you 8 hours or something.
Well, I'll tell you, with my 100-miler, if I look at that file, it actually is. It's like, your elapsed time was 21 something. And total time was just under 24.
No, moving time.
Moving time was,
and you're elapsed. So it's not like you're hiding it, but you are hiding what's happening during those breaks.
Which I think is what makes it really confusing to me, why someone would use it or rely on it.
Well, I think it's in the workout. They want to know that they rode 90 minutes, or I've seen it in the running stuff, they want to know that their average pace was 4 minutes per kilometer when they were running. Right now, ignoring the fact that it actually wasn't their average pace. They're actually doing intervals, right? So it is misrepresenting what they think they're doing. And the argument, which you'll see in forums, is it the same to run, so a 4-minute K, we're doing a 5K run, so that's a 20-minute 5K, right? So this is what someone's saying they're doing, but they stop at 5 traffic lights. Every kilometer there's a traffic light, say, and they take a 2-minute break. So it's not really what they're doing. And again, you might be better to just press lap and record your running segments if that's like what you want to see, or watch rolling 30-second pace or instantaneous pace. Like keep looking at your watch. Instantaneous pace is at 4-minute Ks.
See, that's actually what I have on mine, is maybe why I don't care about any of this, is I just have instantaneous pace.
And so with cyclists, you'll see I want to average, that was our one joke comment, was my average speed's going to drop from 32 to 31 or whatever it was, or 22 to 21. I guess I don't know why I left at 20 kilometers an hour. That's probably the average of most of my rides. Where was I going? Or power would be the other one, right? And so the related thing there would be, you know, do you record? A lot of these Garmin's will have a setting that you should leave to record zeros, but a lot of people will turn that setting off. They don't want to record 0 power or 0 RPM cadence. And again, because it affects the average. But again, that is the average. Like you coasted for half your ride. It doesn't mean you get to like save those moments.
Humans are so funny, aren't we?
Right. Yeah. So you're overcomplicating. So I tried to look up on ChatGPT actually, you know, this, what would be a good analogy for autopause. And the best thing it could come up with, none of these were great, but was like a song. There's pauses and when people take a breath when they're playing music. And so the song requires those pauses. And in fact, if you wanted to replicate that or study that song, that piece of music, you would want to know where these pauses and breaks are. And so similarly, if you were analyzing the song, in this case, the workout, you'd want to know, whether you're the coach or you're the athlete and looking at your past workouts, you'd want to know that it took me 30 minutes to run 5K. Yes, there was traffic light pauses. If I wanted to do better, I could change the route. I could, you know, turn right at any of the stop signs. You know, just those would be ways to get faster. And I think you want those actual things so that then you're either planning your route better, you know, do your intervals, your speed work in a good place, rather than trying to guess at what you've done in the past. And again, that's one of the main things, is that it's hard to ever compare stuff because the traffic lights are never going to be the same. So if you just keep saying that you've been running 20-minute 5Ks that have been taking you 35 minutes, it's not quite the same. Mm-hmm. And I think the load, you know, one of the questions we had there, you know, the one who said is the spouse doesn't use it and he uses it and then it's a problem in mountain biking. You know, he wants to know that he did the 2.5 hour endurance ride that was prescribed. But if that takes 3 hours, that's not really what was prescribed. Something like endurance, the idea is that those legs keep moving. In my mind, that's like one of the biggest things, is like your legs continue to move. There isn't a lot of coasting.
Right. So, okay, so how do they solve for that?
Well, they choose a better route. Like, they're not doing it. Like, I think that would be the harsh criticism I would give them. Like, sometimes you can't. Like, that's the best you have. You know, sometimes we can ride mountain bikes in the city to slow it down, so then there's less coasting because your road bike's very efficient, so you put more resistance. That would be a great thing. Your gravel riders use, like, knobbier tires, lower pressure, try and slow yourself down. But a lot of it is on the route. And this might not be an immediate fix, but, like, it might mean on your key endurance ride, if the goal is to ride 2.5 hours, go places you can ride 2.5 hours, not where it takes you, you know, you have to coast and stuff a lot.
Now, where do you fall on the mountain bike? Because my issue with the mountain bike is always, like, most mountain bike destinations are very up, down, mm-hmm. which is going to put you...
Which is mountain biking. Yeah. But this gets to, like, part of, like, the thought experiment you might have is, okay, so standing at a traffic light doesn't count. Even if you do a little jumps and hops and dances, maybe that doesn't count on autopause. So would it count if you were doing, you know, push-ups? Or would it count, you know, how is that different than descending on a mountain bike? Right? Like, so if it doesn't count when you're not pedaling, then should we record downs, you know, or coasting, or, you know, coasting through a corner on a road bike, or coasting back in the pace line? I think so, because it's part of the sport, right? And again, the body isn't turning off every time you stop pedaling.
No, my heart rate tends to be higher on the downhills.
There's lots of stuff, right? Certainly on mountain biking, there's tons of vibration and resisting and, you know, core and whatever, muscle. Let alone the navigation, the brain, the thinking, coordination. So yeah, you record that. And what are some ways? So your training should reflect, I'm mountain biking for 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, and that's what you do. And then you progress that over time, right? And it probably looks the same. Humans do the same stuff over and over. So wherever you're starting, whatever your 2-hour mountain bike looks like, you can just progress that, whether that's by time or more challenging or more laps or whatever it is. I think that's great. Now, if you were this person and you really wanted to know what to track, there would be things like normalized power is a great metric that gets screwed up by autopause. So if you don't autopause, it's better. But you could use normalized power to say, like, I want to average 200 watts on this ride. That was my zone. And if there was a bunch of pauses, what you'll find is that the normalized power helps to reflect what that actual steady state load would have been. So you might average 160 watts, but then see that your ride was 200 watts. And that would be a great way to say, yeah, I was out for 2 hours, and the normalized power for that entire 2 hours, even with the little stop and the construction, I normalized 200 watts. And you'll see that all the time. And I would say, great. There you go. The normalized power algorithm is meant to express the equivalent physiological estimated and with lots of asterisks is load of a equivalently hard steady state ride. So that might be one thing. The other thing that you can do is kilojoules. So the amount of work put into the pedals when you have a power meter, not the calories that are estimated by the Garmin. That's often not great. But the kilojoules, the physical work that you've put into the pedals, would be another spot that if you knew, again, I don't think you always need to do this, and calories, kilojoules can go down a bad path, obviously, as far as, consumption, body. Yeah, exactly, right? So, but I think sometimes when I'm mountain biking, I might know that, like, oh, I coasted a lot in this, and like I ended up riding with people who were slower, and like, okay, so I'm at like 600 kilojoules. Usually my 2 hour ride is, 600 times 2 is 1200. Something like that, like 1200, 1300 kilojoules, sorry. So then I might ride a bit more to get to 1200 kilojoules. When you have something to base that around, don't base it around 1200 kilojoules, but like,
don't do that.
Whatever your normal endurance ride is, that might be another way. If you're like, yeah, I coasted a lot, this didn't really work out, we got lost, there was a bunch of, standing around or, walking or something, or, whatever, faffing about.
Faffing, but nice.
So can we say nail in the coffin? The big thing here for training athletes, though, is that Training Peaks itself recommends not using it because it screws up the data. I mentioned the normalized power, which is central to calculating TSS, your fitness score, intensity factor, all these things. So it's in Training Peaks. We will link to it in the show notes that they recommend not using it for proper data calculation. So if you're also a person who like really looks at that fitness score and wants valid data, that's just the answer.
Oh, that's funny because those people are probably the same, right?
Yeah, it's the same person. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's like one of the biggest things here is that they recommend not using it. And I was trying to like really go in and dig into like why exactly. And it's really when I quote unquote catch people with this, you'll end up seeing a normalized power that's lower than the average power, which shouldn't really happen, but it's because of those gaps. It just screws up the math, the algorithm, right? Usually, again, the normalized power will say, okay, there was a couple of coasting bits, and then you surged. And so, like, had you just ridden steady, the normalized power would be this. And on a very steady ride, you'd have 1-to-1. This would be a variability index of 1.0, normalized power divided by average power, or vice versa. I always get those confused. But comparing those, if they're the same, then you have no variability, and that would be very steady. So like a triathlete would be very, very happy about that. They went out and they rode super steady, or you were on a trainer, very, very steady. Mountain biking would be a higher variability index, but it would be basically, I again tried to find a situation. I thought there was a situation, but it would be rare. So usually if you see that, then it's an error.
It just occurred to me that the autopause is almost akin to face tuning photos on Instagram.
Okay, so like in reality, your face is your face.
Yes.
Okay.
But then you're using this like app to kind of tweak how it presents.
Right. Okay.
Like within your little device thing.
Okay.
Sorry, unrelated to exactly
what you still have to live with the fact that your face is your face. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is a little like attacking on myself, but maybe that's we'll put that up with the analogy GPT came up with the music and the gaps in the music.
I think I'm right.
Well, I think that's it. You want to have like, this is reality. And yes, maybe it isn't like this stereotypically perfect triathlete ride that's very steady, but I think that's okay. And it reflects what yours normal is, because what I'll see, over years, this is sometimes where I get to see, a lot of athletes' data and their training environment and what they care about and the common mistakes and the drama we all go through periodically in life. And when you zoom out, it's like, okay, well, right now you live in a city and it's very busy. You only have an hour. I get it. But in 5 years, you could live somewhere. You live in the mountains. We have lots of clients like this where last time they did Leadville was 10 years ago. Very busy, young business person with a new kid, and they lived in a city and they could barely train for Leadville, and they did it in just 11 hours and 30 minutes. Now they're 10 years older, yes, but they now live in Colorado. This is an actual story, and the kids are older. and their job is very free and they're, retired or whatever the situation is. And it's just like, now you can compare. Last time you did Leadville, there was these 2-hour rides where you coasted or weren't moving for an hour. Now you're in the mountains and you climb for an hour out of every 2-hour ride. Right. And it's like, why would we not want to have this data that's like very nice to compare, like apples to apples, right? Like when you rode for 2 hours, you used to coast for an hour. Now you don't coast, very much.
Well, and I think if you have the autopause on, there's less incentive to change your route, or your route choice behavior, right? Like you don't really mind about the stoplight because it's going to autopause. But you're right. You and I are both like, if you actually look, whenever we're in cities and we, post on Strava or whatever, our routes are always so many right-hand turns because we'll both just turn right to avoid waiting at a light.
Sure. And, the road athletes probably have more of a problem with this if you're not willing to use paths or, technically, safety-wise, you don't like using paths or going into parks or these types of things. But that is the solution usually in a city is lots of right-hand turns. Don't run your stop signs. I didn't tell you to run stop signs. Industrial block, park loops. Look where they run races, like sometimes like where they would run a criterium practice or a time trial route, it's often monotonous, but like I think probably most people on this listening to this ride a trainer. So I always say if it's a 5-minute loop, that's really not that bad.
It's true.
Right? It's monotonous, but so is training, so is racing. I always go back to, if you're doing a 200-mile gravel race, that's going to be pretty damn monotonous and boring at times. So we'd go and do that work. And again, the nice thing is that then your file is beautiful and it looks really nice. And then the rest of your ride can be a little messier. So this is, again, the interval concept where we're chunking that up to what needs to be focused on, what average actually matters. And then don't be so stressed. Like this is the analogy of people being like moderately stressed all the time versus like sleeping and running, vigorously away from a lion or whatever type of animal we're running away from. Right. And we want that more polarized idea where lots of low key, low stress, your coach and your team, I guess, the some work, all play. I really love that where there's a little bit of work and, serious, you call it fancy business or no fancy. I always get confused.
It's fancy business. Yeah. Right? Nothing fancy.
But
all
otherwise,
business.
They say, you're just out running and you're just playing, right? It should be a little more joyful and exploring. And yeah, there'll be some coasting. The last thing I'm thinking here, maybe just go through there while I'm thinking through this and talking about this, if we didn't miss anything else. But the other thing that you can do as far as data analysis when you're trying to track this, and what I'll look at is, the time that someone's power is 0 or near 0. These are easy to put, in Training Peaks or any of your analysis software. You can look at how much time was spent at whatever threshold. I would say, 0 to 5 is probably the it doesn't really, sometimes there's going to be low power, but you'll see that someone who's standing at a traffic light, for half an hour out of a 2-hour workout, you'll see half an hour of 0 to 5 watts. Similarly, the cadence, if you don't have power, not all is lost. The time that your cadence is 0 to 5 RPM per minute, or RPM, minutes part of that, again, is a great way to see that, right? You could also look at speed, which would be recorded in elapsed data. When was your speed 0 to whatever, 5 kilometers per hour, right? And then that would be something that then you could assess, right? Is this too much? Is this too little? And again, that would be something you could look at normalized graded pace for runners or normalized power for bikers, where again, to see how was that workout and how variable was it? Was it too variable for the goals that you had for that workout? And a lot of times it's not. I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Okay, last thing though is when would someone use autopause? Like in what situation does autopause make sense?
I was saying to you in the beginning that we always should try and invert this idea and like think about the alternative, right? Because they're probably, nothing's bad. There's reasons that like, why did Garmin even create this?
Well, I was going to say, Garmin clearly.
So I think if I kept emphasizing athlete and training. I think if you were someone, in the gym and you're running on your treadmill for half an hour and that's how you do your fitness, your health and fitness, and you have goals like that, and you get off the treadmill to go to the water fountain and your goal is to run for 30 minutes. I guess I could see there where like that person with their little Garmin Vivo active, wristwatch, that might be good for them. They might like that, where it's like 30 minutes and that's what they're really basing it around. I would say for athletes, though, it's not capturing what you're actually trying to do, right? I think someone who's more like fitness, weight loss, something like that, maybe there's something in that. And that's probably what Garmin was thinking, was that this would be convenient for that type of person who's really doing that.
Even both from like the motivational standpoint and in the like actually doing the time, because definitely like you could see someone who is setting the 150 minutes of exercise per week kind of thing. And, they stop at the bathroom, they stop at the water fountain, they stop at the stoplight. And actually, like, instead of, so they're hitting the 150, like, elapsed time, but they've actually only gotten, like, 90 minutes because
Sure.
they keep stopping. So in that case, autopause actually does make sense to really like make sure that you're accumulating the actual time moving. But like you say, that's not really the same case for
Right.
someone training for a
And
goal.
no shade at those people. There's lots
No.
of people that are not competitive cyclists. But I think for competitive cyclists, this is like the analogy of like we're taking you out of the zoo, we're putting you in the wild. You are now a tiger or whatever animal you want to be, and you have to survive in that environment. And that environment doesn't care about that. There's a lot of other things that are important. If we go skills, tactical elements, your perception of the road, the other users on the trail. Again, mountain biking, there's a whole host of things that are more important than whether your heart rate was zone 2 for 90 minutes or whatever the thing is, right? So we want to think about all of those aspects. And to me, that's where that chamois time is training time is pretty important, because when you're out on your mountain bike, you might invest 30 minutes in changing a flat, and I would just record it, right? Like you're learning, this is going towards your goal. So I would just record that. Like I wouldn't pause that. That's like, to me, is probably one of the most valuable things most people could do. Would be like sit there and figure out how plugs work for half an hour, out of a 90-minute ride.
For sure.
Or again, like if you think through it, there's a lot of errors in that whole idea of auto pausing, because you probably don't when you're descending a big mountain descent in California and you're having the time of your life. I guarantee you, most people, there are people, didn't press stop because they were coasting for half an hour. They probably, hopefully, were looking at not going over the side of the guardrail and, going down the mountain on, the wrong way. But, hopefully enjoying it. And again, soaking up the skill of descending and following the wheel and taking in the terrain. And, again, you just did all the work to get to the top of the mountain, like enjoy it. So I think that's, if you're like, okay, I wouldn't pause in that scenario, then why are you pausing at a stop sign?
Yeah, for sure. And the fact is, as long as you have the whole file, you can always take out all of those pauses later.
It's
and
all there.
See all the data. Like
it's all there, and that's, again, there's peak. Your peak pace for 5 minutes, or your peak, whatever. Right? It's all going to be part of that file.
Like if anything, autopause is actually losing you some of your best efforts with those starts, where it's like doesn't start recording for a few seconds.
Well, again, it's crushing to me because you don't get to see that recovery heart rate after someone stops, which is actually really valuable fitness information.
Sure.
Right? Like that's actually a fitness test. You run vigorously, you stop, and can you recover your heart rate down? Sometimes you'll see under 120 beats in 2 minutes. Right? Go ahead and do that after your next interval session. Just stand there and time yourself for how long. But your autopause is on, and now you can't do this experiment. But that's, one of these things that it's sort of interesting to see the time to recover to 120 beats. Sometimes they'll say 60%, the number doesn't really matter, but to recover to a set heart rate just standing there, right? I'd be interested, do you know Misha, who your book is coming out soon? What's the date for this book?
Yes, Sprinting Through Setbacks with Misha Powell is coming out July 1st. Very exciting.
Now, she is a track runner, and I would be curious how she records her workouts.
Well, I don't think she wears like a Garmin watch.
She doesn't even record time.
Doesn't even record
So she
time.
probably
Time has no meaning.
But I bet you she has set track time.
Oh, yeah.
10 to 11 a.m. And then she has her workout sets.
Yeah.
Which are like run 20 meters as fast as you can, or at like 7 out of 10 sprint effort. And then she probably has to like walk back or something, or is there a time, do you think?
I think it's a walk back.
Okay, we should have her on and I can ask her sprint questions.
We absolutely will have her on, yes.
Right. So I don't know. I think you'll see different things there as far as the stopping and starting, whether it's auto pause, but again, Training Peaks says not to use it, so I think that's probably a guiding principle for a lot of us to keep the data valid. And again, I want you to expand that out and think about like what is training, like what is important, and what am I focused on? And I think that's probably my last point. You can claim that you have more points.
No, I was just I did. Well, I guess it's
okay. Molly has
one
more point.
One more point
is this idea that we're in our environment, we're training away, we're enjoying it, and I think that's probably the most important thing is that we're out there not letting our brain get like distracted by this beeping thing too often, right? I've actually been playing with not having any, like I have no tones on my Garmin and it's fine. The odd time I'll like accidentally not quite press the lap button, but otherwise it really isn't that bad and it's very silent and I really like it. But when you have that go on and off, and often again, we didn't even talk about the, you're going up a slow switchback or a slow climb.
Right.
And it's turning on and off. And again, that's the hardest, the heaviest effort probably you're doing, and it's turning on and off. So that's like one of the big criticisms with autopause. But again, just even that mental distraction of, now you have a workout where you're like, I am so slow. The autopause turned on because I am so slow. And it's not true. It's just, they were going 6 kilometers an hour. Nino Schurter won a World Cup this past weekend in Val d'Isole. It was a tremendous race to watch. They were going up this vertical hill. I swear he must have been doing like 650 watts for like a minute and a half and 5 kilometers an hour.
Just so slow. So
Which,
slow.
that is walking pace. But he looked like he was going quickly. But his autopause probably would have turned on in places because there was a couple switchbacks. And it's like, okay, well, if your autopause turns on, it probably isn't the worst thing. So we just turn it off, and then we don't have that whole mental anguish, and then that workout goes better, and the next workout goes better, and then what is the roof of your potential if you don't have that one extra or 10 extra little negative bits that come into your workouts over the week.
Yeah.
So I think to me that mental piece, at first I was like, I don't know if that's, but I think it actually is a big deal.
For sure.
Yeah, which doesn't get concerned. And again, for the road athletes, maybe it's less of a concern. But certainly off-road gravel, if you're actually out doing climbs like you're supposed to be doing, it's just a no-no.
Yeah.
You had a thought to finish.
Mine was really just using if you've been using autopause, using that as information to inform your route choice. So even this is like such a micro example, but in the past year, I switched where I crossed the road to get out of our house to the trail, to find a better, to basically figure out a spot where I could keep running and wait for the traffic to stop, so I wouldn't be waiting at the stoplight for 30 seconds.
Sure.
Because I don't like standing there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if you are using autopause, like, okay, where is it usually autopausing on your routes, and how can you troubleshoot that? Is there a different, a different way you can take, or can you stay on that side of the road a little longer?
Right, and this sounds like a tiger in the wild who decides not to cross the road in this dangerous spot.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with the 3-legged lion during the swim.
Oh, these 2 brother lions, what a story.
We'll link to this article from the New York Times in the show notes.
Yeah, brothers. And this one has 3 legs, and he lost it in 2020 in a poacher's trap. And then because of environment and their territory got taken, and then they lost a battle for territory with the remaining males in the area. There weren't enough females, so they had to cross this river. They tried to cross it 3-legged lion. And his brother, this is like a Disney movie. They tried to cross it 3 times. The second time they had this heat stuff. You could see the animals in the water, and a big hippo or croc was coming behind them. And so they did an evasive maneuver and made a Y and went back to the original shore. Then on the 3rd time they swam a mile, longest recorded lion crossing in swimming.
So we will be shifting our podcast to strictly animal.
Consummate lion.
Only animal records from now on.
So yeah, you're like an animal that's responding to the environment in an intelligent way, not auto-pausing and just being content every day that I wait for 30 seconds. You're saying there has to be a safer or smoother way for me to stay out of danger, or to train more effectively in our scenario here. And you just try different solutions, and you're like, oh wow, that was really slick. I turned right, ran down the highway, which, okay, it's a little busy, but big shoulder. And then, yeah, it's usually safe to cross eventually, and then you cross the highway. Some may call that jaywalking. But then, you're away, and it's like, okay, well, there you go. The autopause just, it's not even a factor anymore.
Yeah, it's silly to say it, but I've gone from being stopped for, almost a minute at this particular light to, I don't think I've stopped for more than 5 seconds. I'll only stop at that light to cross if it's already blinking red and I can see that it's about to change,
Sure.
then I'll wait.
And yeah, I love that. That's navigation. It's a little, even for you, you really like out and back,
I love an out and back.
Predictability, which is, a little related to this, it's the same all the time. But I love that then you were like, okay, well, how can I make this a little smoother, right? Get out there and again, make that hour workout 1 hour.
Now I do occasionally have to fight a goose family. Because now my route goes past them. But that just adds again, this animal element of danger, apparently.
I mean, lion versus goose.
Yeah.
Goose every time.
Yeah, I'd vote for the goose. I have no faith whatsoever. If they actually started trying to fight me, I would be.
So there you go. I think let the timer run. There's lots of places we could go with this. What constitutes a workout and that sort of thing. But we will leave some of those questions. If there's follow-up questions, things you're really upset about,
you want to fight us on the
comment
autopause?
that. You can do it on Instagram. You can use the contact form at consummateathlete.com. We have a new website with a contact form there, so feel free to click on through and let us know your thoughts about autopause, or again subsequent questions that are related. When should I start a new workout as a popular one? 24-hour races, should it be a separate workout? I'm giving you the answers to these questions, but we'd love to handle related or unrelated questions.
Awesome. All right, with that, we will let you go. We'll see you next week. Happy training. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.